There's something really interesting brewing in the land of the Mapuche. I am Loki the Gamer, and I had a lot of fun making 6 cards to represent the Mapuche in my homemade Civilization 6 themed Magic the Gathering cards. Let's take a look at what I did for these fierce rebels that care very much about loyalty of their cities and attacking other people through loyalty. The 6-card Mapuche set will have 1 legendary land, 1 leader, 2 unique builds, 1 card modeled after the leader's agenda, and 1 bonus themed after a concept of the game in general that particularly finds its home in the strategy of the Mapuche. So, a very traditional little set for the 6 cards of the Mapuche. There will indeed be mention of rebellion and loyalty attacks. Now, normally, loyalty bonuses come in the form of your cities gain extra loyalty. And that's why, according to my equivalency chart, I have translated the concept of such loyalty bonuses to protection of some kind. For example, ward or hexproof. Something like that. So your lands or your creatures, whatever represents the concept of cities in this case, would get some extra protection to represent the fact that you gain some loyalty bonuses. But in the case of the Mapuche, their loyalty powers are actually more about loyalty attacks, not about increasing their own loyalty, but decreasing their enemies' loyalty in order to take over cities, in order to foment dissent and rebellion. So Ward, in this case, will work in a limited capacity because they do have some bonus loyalty abilities, but all of their loyalty attack abilities will have to be treated a different way. So I treated the concept of lowering an opponent's loyalty until they rebel, and you can take them over, into exiling cards from their library and then stealing them. Very much like what I did for Eleanor of Aquitaine in my French pack. I absolutely love that card. I think it's one of my most successful cards, and I got to more or less revisit a similar concept for the Mapuche, so yay! So the concept of loyalty bonuses, a traditional loyalty boost to your cities, will actually not be treated with ward, but rather protection, which is another way of protecting, and culture boost will also be treated as protection. It's on the list, so culture translates to a number of things, a number of usually pacifying things. To consider that opposing creatures are too busy loving your culture to attack it, so a cultural player is normally a peaceful player, so getting a culture boost translates to getting ways of discouraging other creatures from attacking you, and in this case we'll use protection, which, of course, as we all know, protection can be turned easily into an aggressive capability also. A creature with protection from something cannot take damage from that thing. Sure, that's the defensive side of it, but it can't also be blocked by that thing either. So protection is really kind of the best way of achieving a pacifying culture boost, because it's more versatile. There will be production boost, which of course turn into ramping, so extra mana. There will be the concept of governors, so very few Civilization 6 leaders have powers that pertain to governors, and that usually translates to creatures with the advisor type, and in this case also legendary creatures in general. I do have one civ that will involve governors in a very fanciful, different way, but that's a surprise for later. Now, there will be the concept of experience, so combat bonuses, experience promotions. That translates to +1/+1 counters, so military boosts, expect some stats boosts and some +1/+1 counters. And if that package wasn't dense enough already, expect the Mapuche to have a little bit of a rebel tribal thing going on, much like Ambiorix of the Gaul. And finally, there's the concept of golden ages, not because they have bonuses to their own golden ages like Georgia does, but instead the Mapuche get a bonus when they attack people in a golden age. So people who think that they're all high and mighty and highfalutin higher thinking, we're in a golden age, well, the Mapuche sweep in and attack you and do so in a spectacular way. So that's interesting, and for Georgia, the concept of the Golden Age translated spectacularly with the concept of miracle spells of magic. I was really happy about how that turned out, but for the Mapuche, instead, the concept of a Golden Age, and specifically attacking people in a Golden Age, will translate into attacking a player with more life than you do. A player like that is considered to be in a Golden Age. Wow, that was a lot of things, and yet somehow it all works out. I really think that the Mapuche is one of my most successful sets. We'll see in a minute the details, but first, the color identity of the Mapuche. It will be rug, red, blue, green. So, a Temur color scheme. Interestingly, since we did talk about the Gaul just now, the Gaul also have a bit of a rebel tribal thing going on. But these two people are not completely... Basically, you could build a Mapuche deck with Lautaro as your commander, and you could squeeze in there all of the Gaul cards, because they are Gruul, they are red and green. But the same thing is not true the other way around, because indeed Ambiorix of the Gaul is only red and green. You wouldn't be able to put the Mapuche in your 99. Maybe some cards would be able to fit, but not Lautaro himself, not many of the cards that have blue. Let's learn more about the Mapuche people and their ability in Civilization 6. The ability is called Tokwi. So, here is where we rely on governors. Cities with established governors provide extra culture, extra production, and extra experience for units built in that city. So I found a way to make that work using my own homemade interpretation of what a governor is. Creatures that are advisors and also legendary creatures, and sure enough, you'll see those governors will earn you a culture boost, in this case protection if you'll remember, and also some ramping. And if that ramping is used to summon a creature, well, that creature will come in with more experience in the form of +1/+1 counters. So I worked all that in, but we're not done reading the ability. Those numbers are tripled in cities not founded by the Mapuche. Basically, any city that you've stolen, cities that you've either conquered or stolen through loyalty, rebellions, either way, if you have a city that you didn't found, then all of those bonuses are better, 3 times stronger. It's in your best interest when you play the Mapuche to steal cities one way or the other and then stick to your governors there. Make sure that those cities become nice and fat and well organized and strong, and stick your governors there. Oh, and side note, we're not done. This ability also grants loyalty bonuses to your cities with governors. So I had to find a way to involve that whole tripling concept for cities that you didn't found in my land of the Mapuche, and of course I had to make this fairly balanced for merely a land. I know I've created many lands that were way too crazy game ranking, and I really tried for this one not to fall in that category. So let's take a look at Walmapu, land of the Mapuche. That is indeed what the Mapuche call their land. Walmapu. It is a rare card, a legendary land that enters tapped, because it taps for rug, first of all, for red, blue, or green. And you do lose 1 life to sort of balance out the fact that it's got this amazing Tokwi ability. And it's quite a mouthful, as you can see, quite a chunky paragraph. Let's take a look. So tap Walmapu. Until end of turn, target legendary creature or advisor, so that's your governor, gains protection from the color of your choice. So there's the concept of cities with governors gain extra loyalty. If your governor gets protection, it represents the fact that your city has protection and therefore extra loyalty. And let's not forget that protection is the way I chose to represent culture boosts for the Mapuche, so that protection also represents the extra culture that your city gets. So that one protection actually serves 2 thematic purposes. Let's read on. Your target, so your advisor or your legendary creature, will also gain, until end of turn, tap to add 2 mana of any one color. And this represents the ramping, the production that you get from your governors. And then finally, to represent the experience that your units get through governors, there's something special with these 2 mana. It says, if this mana is spent to cast a creature spell, that creature enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. And of course, since there are 2 mana involved, conceivably, these 2 mana could be spent to cast 2 different creatures, and in that case, if you interpret the line correctly as written, then both of these creatures would enter with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. And finally, the concept of the tripling. So if the Mapuche do all that in a city that they didn't found, you're supposed to get to triple these bonuses. Well, the end of the ability says, if you control a permanent you don't own, instead choose up to 3 targets for this ability. So going all the way back to the top of the ability, it says, until end of turn, target legendary creature or advisor, blah blah blah, gets all of that stuff. Well, then you get to tap the Walmapu land for 3 potential targets if you control something that you don't own. So there's the tripling aspect. So it's not exactly free. You need to actually have 3 advisors and or legendary creatures in order to successfully triple that ability. So it's all nice and good if you meet the requirement, if you've got control of a permanent you don't own, but you can't exploit the tripling aspect if you don't actually have 3 targets. Heck, you don't even get to do it once if you don't have 1 advisor / legendary creature. Thankfully, obviously, your commander is, by definition, a legendary creature, so if Lautaro is on the battlefield, well, you've at least got him. So there you go, there's my Walmapu Land of the Mapuche, a complex card, but it does exactly what the Mapuche effect in Civ 6 does, all rolled into one single land. So there's a little bit of a Mother of Runes effect in there, which is already cheap. She already costs just 1 white, so the fact that this is a land that comes in play for free, but that doesn't work unless you have a governor to tap to use it, and all this ramping is all nice and good, but once again, you actually have to have a target, so I think that's fairly well balanced, and to help balance it, I even made the land lose you life whenever you use it for mana. So there you go. Let's take a look at Lautaro. We've already spoken about him a few times now, and his ability is the Swift Hawk. I bet you that John Curtin of Australia doesn't like him and his obsession to attack the Hawks of War and whatnot. His Swift Hawk ability says extra combat strength when fighting free cities or civilizations that are in a golden age. So there you go, I've used the concept of a player having more life than you to represent an opponent being in a golden age, so you can expect some combat bonuses that apply under those circumstances. And also, when you defeat an enemy unit within the borders of an enemy city, well, okay, I didn't use the concept of within the borders. Basically, I made it whenever you defeat an enemy unit, period. The enemy city loses loyalty. So basically, you get to weaken a city's loyalty and eventually capture that city, make it flip, make it rebel if you defeat a lot of units near it. So I really turned Lautaro into a creature-stealing beast, very much the same way as I did for Eleanor, in a way that you don't actually steal other creatures, you get to exile stuff from their library and then you get to steal that. And I use a very nifty keyword that, of course, I did not invent. I simply recycled it. I love reusing existing keyword. It brings a sense of coherence to my set. It really makes my set slip into the lore of magic very seamlessly. So, of course, I was very happy to think about that keyword, and we'll discover that in a moment. Like now. Lautaro Mapuche Tokwi. Cast for 1 red, 1 blue, 1 green. He is a 3/3, a rare human rebel warrior, so it's relevant that he's a rebel. Don't forget, there is a little bit of a rebel tribal thing going on here with a Mapuche. We're about to learn more about that. and there's his Swift Hawk ability. When you attack a player with more life than you, creatures you control gain +3/+3 until end of turn. So there's a little bit of a dethrone thing going on here, and yes, that sounds huge, +3/+3, but if you do attack them with that bonus, then very probably next turn they won't have more life than you, so don't expect that power to always be active, to always be on. If you truly do one massive devastating attack, then your next attack will probably be a lot weaker because you've weakened your opponent that much. You've dragged them out of their golden age, literally. And sure, of course, when everything is said and done, maybe +3/+3 is too much. I'm always open to suggestions. Maybe there's a tweak that can be made here and there. I'm thinking of a strategy that involves not attacking your opponent at all until you know that you can one-shot them. So that's pretty nasty. So then you will get your +3/+3, and the fact that you've weakened your opponent and your next attack will be a lot weaker doesn't matter because there will be no next attack. You've killed them, you've won the game. So that's also an interesting strategy. That's why perhaps the +3/+3 might be too expensive. Or maybe I could associate a cost with that. That's also a thought. Let's move on to the really exciting part, his city flipping concept. So the fact that he gets to steal some stuff from his opponents without really stealing permanents that they have on the battlefield outright. Gotta be careful about making stealing permanents too easy. I know that he has blue in him, and blue is good at doing that. But even blue has to be careful about making stealing too easy, too frequent, and I did want Lautaro to use his ability frequently, so the compromise I come up with is this. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, exile it with 4 time counters on it. If it doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend. If that opponent has more life than you, so again, if they are in a golden age, put 2 time counters on the card instead. So there you go, you get to steal creatures that you kill. The same way that Lautaro in the game gets to weaken and flip a city when he kills units nearby. Well, the magic version also gets to flip creatures by killing them first. So you kill the creatures, and then you wait a bit, and then you get them through suspend. And yes, suspend is indeed the existing keyword that I chose to recycle. If you had some bets on suspend, you've won! And notice that I simply wrote exile it with 4 time counters on it. If it doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend. When you think about it, I didn't have to specify that you control that suspended card, that when the last time counter is removed, you get to cast it without paying its mana cost. I didn't have to say that because I said exile. So you exile it. Since I'm talking to you exile it with 4 time counters on it. That means you control the act of exiling, so you control the card. You will get to cast it without paying its mana cost. I didn't say the opponent exiles it with 4 time counters on it. That's what I would have said if I wanted the card to be in the control of the opponent still. Since I said exile it, you do, then you control the suspend, you will get to cast it for free when the suspend is done. And yeah, sure enough, I brought back the concept of the Golden Age thingy. When you attack an opponent with more life, you will get to put fewer time counters, so you will bring back that creature sooner. So there you go, there's my Lautaro, there's my creature stealing Lautaro. And yes, you don't steal outright, you have to kill creatures first and then steal them. So there's the concept of flipping cities when you kill a lot of their units. Quite proud of how that worked out for Lautaro. Now let's take a look at his unique unit, the Malon Raider. We forgot to mention that there would be pillaging involved. Of course, the Malon Raider is expert at pillaging. Well, all units can pillage, of course, and it is something that you'd be a fool to ignore in Civ 6. It is very powerful. Sometimes, even in the early game, it's worth declaring war on your opponent just to pillage their land a little bit. You know, you might think, well, no, a war is a serious thing. If I declare war, it's because I intend to capture a city or 2 or 3, and capturing a city is a massive enterprise. Even in the early game, you really got to consider bombardments and all that. Yes, it's true. That's why You don't always have to have the ambition of attacking and defeating and conquering a city when waging war. Sometimes the purpose for waging war could just be to pillage a bunch of land and then at your first opportunity declare peace. It's sneaky like that, especially in the early game. Those bonuses can really rack up, and also your neighbors will forget your transgressions eventually if this happens early enough in the game. So that's a parenthesis on the benefits of pillaging in Civ 6 in general, but especially if you have a Madeline Raider as the Mapuche, because they get to pillage with fewer movement costs. So you can pillage and then run away. You are not a sitting duck. That's really good. Let's see what I did for the concept of pillaging. According to my chart, we didn't talk about it during the overview, but it is there. I likened the concept of pillaging, same as I did with flooding, with the concept of stun counters. So basically, you render something useless for a while. So you've pillaged it in Civ 6. When something's been pillaged, you've got to repair it. It takes time. So same thing here for the concept of a stun counter. Your permanent will not untap during your next untap phase. Instead, you remove a stun counter. So yeah, it really makes it useless for a little while, so it seemed to be very relevant. The Madeline Raider looks like this. For 4 mana, 2 red and 2 generic, you've got a rare human horse rebel, and as we always say, the concept of a mounted unit must be represented with the horse creature type, because some powers care about giving boosts to mounted units, others care because they have a bonus when fighting mounted units, so it's important to stick the horse creature type in there, even though normal Magic traditions would not do that. So you've got this 4/3 creature that says, whenever this creature attacks, you may put a stun counter on target land defending player controls. If you do, add 1 mana of any color that land could produce. Until end of turn, you don't lose unspent mana as steps and phases end. So there you go, you get to pillage their land, you get to stun their land, and of course the purpose of pillaging is to get some goodies from it. Now I do realize that sometimes in Civ 6, depending on the land, you get faith, sometimes you get healing for your unit, sometimes you get science, so sometimes you get a variety of different things. I wasn't about to offer a different selection of reward depending on the land, depending on whether the land had an aura on it, all of these kinds of things. It would have been cute and very thematically successful, but too complex at the end of the day. I therefore gave you ramp. I gave you a free mana. That's your reward for pillaging. It's very satisfying, and it makes some sense since we are pillaging what? We're pillaging a land. That's what lands do in Magic. They give you mana, so you get to essentially steal your opponent's 1 mana for 1 turn. The Chemamul is the unique Mapuche infrastructure, and guess what? We also didn't talk about this. So many things already in our overview, and there were more things still that we didn't talk about. We didn't talk about pillaging, and we didn't talk about appeal. Yes, as you see from the chart here, appeal is what? That is a completely new concept that does not exist in Magic the Gathering, so I made up my own. I made up my own keyword, the keyword of appeal, that I've only gotten to use in a few civs. Only a few civilizations actually care about appeal. Australia is one of them, and sure enough, the Mapuche is one of them also, just because of that one infrastructure. The Chemamul is an improvement upon the land that they can make, and you get some culture bonuses that scales up with the appeal of the tile itself. So I made it a requirement. So in Civ 6, in order for the Chemamul to be any good, you have to have high appeal. Well, on the Magic card, I made it so that if you don't have high appeal, your Chemamul doesn't even work. And since it grants you a culture boost, well, I turned the Chemamul into a deterrent to attack, like most culture benefits. Not any of the ones that are listed on my equivalency chart, but you will recognize the kind of thing that I used. It's been seen on many other Magic cards. And since this is an improvement that generates culture, and all such improvements that generate culture eventually generate tourism after the discovery of flight, well, I turned this into something that actually benefits your opponent. Thematically, they visited your land, they love your land, so there's got to be a reason for that. They've got to get something out of it. They've got some good memories, some good snapshots, some Instagram followers, so I translated that into giving your opponent a little reward. Let's look at all of that rolled up into one little artifact that costs 5. It's an uncommon. Mind you, most land improvements turn into land auras, but look at this thing. It's literally a totem. It's literally an artifact, so it had to be an artifact. So first, the reliance on appeal. Well, first of all, what is appeal? What is that crazy concept that I invented for the concept of appeal? Let's look at the reminder text in italics. A player's appeal is 0, +1 for each mountain and each forest they control, -1 for each swamp they control. So the Mapuche don't have to worry about swamps, they can't have swamps. However, hopefully they'll have a whole bunch of forests and mountains, so their appeal should be pretty high. But they can't only have that, they must have islands also. And you must have a whole bunch of dual lands, most of which don't have basic land types, so it's a struggle to have actually enough mountains and forests in a 3-color deck of the Mapuche. So, a challenge, but not an impossible one, so you should have a good enough appeal, and you do need a good enough appeal. This says if your appeal is less than 4 as you cast this spell, counter it. So you cannot cast this unless your appeal is 4. So, I don't know, maybe 2 forests, 2 mountains, how hard is that? So you would think that it's doable. And you would need to control conceivably that many lands anyway, because this thing costs 5. And let's see now how I turned it into an attack deterrent, a cultural power that deters attacks. You would tap the Chamamul, and until end of turn, creatures can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless their controller pays X for each of those creatures, where X is your appeal. So there again, not only having a high appeal is a requirement, but you are rewarded for getting a high appeal. It makes sense because your cultural boost in Civ 6 is dependent on the appeal of that terrain. And then the little reward that I give your opponents for actually coming to visit your land. Whenever a player pays this cost, they gain X life. So sure, I make it very, very hard for you to attack me. For each of your creatures, you must pay X if you want that creature to attack me, but when you do pay X, you gain X life, so it's kind of win-win, so I get super well protected, and you're not happy to spend that much mana just to attack me. You know, anyone who's played against an Enchantress deck with the Sphere of Safety knows what we're talking about here, but when you do pay that mana, you get a little reward. And in fact, some civs might actually care about you gaining life, such as Canada. I created a crazy card in the Canada set that wins you the game if your opponent has enough life. So you want your opponents to have extra life. Something like that would be amazing in a Canada deck. And Canada being green and white, they should have no problems getting enough forests to have enough appeal to cast this thing. So a nasty card for Canada, you get protected, and you give life to your opponent, which will eventually win you the game if you've got your land of Canada. Alright, enough about Canada. Let's talk about the agenda of Lautaro. It's called the Spirit of Tucapel. He loves people with high loyalty. He does not like people who have trouble keeping their cities loyal, so therefore I made it into an enchantment that punishes people when they lose control of their stuff. It's a 1 blue common enchantment that says, whenever a player gains control of a permanent they don't own, Spirit of Tucapel deals X damage to the owner of that permanent, where X is the permanent's mana value. If the permanent is a land, X is 4 instead. So this fits wonderfully with the strategy of the Mapuche. but not so much with the built-in suspend abilities of Lautaro, because when Lautaro's ability kicks in, you don't gain control of a permanent. No, that permanent no longer is a permanent, it's dead, and now it's exiled with time counters on it, so you didn't gain control of a permanent. And when you do cast the suspended card without paying its mana cost because the last time counter is gone, you already control that thing, so you've never gained control of a permanent. So in order to make use of this fine enchantment here, you've got to use your own stealing effects. So load your deck with control magics, some blue ones that are permanent or some red ones that are impulsive, temporary. Either way, you've got to rely on your own creature or permanent stealing effects for the Spirit of Tucapel to actually synergize with the rest of the Mapuche set. The Lautaro effect will not actually trigger it. Neither will the effect of the last card in the set. So I decided to represent the concept of a Free City Rebellion as a card, and I stuck that in the Mapuche set because, you know, where else? It makes perfect sense that they would have such a card. And it too relies on the suspend ability. So it is a 3-cost sorcery uncommon, 1 blue, 2 green, that says reveal cards from the top of target player's library until you reveal a creature card. Exile it with 3 time counters on it. If it doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend. Put the other revealed cards on the bottom of that player's library in a random order. Until end of turn, rebels you control and creatures you control but don't own have tap, remove a time counter from target suspended card. So here's where we finally get this whole rebel tribal concept. So no, it's not a very synergetic concept. You don't need to load your deck up with rebels just because of that one card. Lautaro himself doesn't really care about rebels. He himself is one. So just for that reason, playing with this card could be a good idea. But no, you don't need to make your entire deck rebel tribal just because of that one card. Actually, maybe you do want to do exactly that if you've included all of the Gaul cards in your deck, as we talked about at the beginning. But anyway, yeah, so it's not a huge reliance on rebels, but it makes sense that your rebels will help you flip the city that much faster. Rebels and also creatures that you've stolen, because they too are essentially rebels. So the logic is that these rebels are in the city, they work for you, they will facilitate the transition, and therefore they get to remove a bunch of time counters. In theory, if you have enough rebels, next turn, poof, you will get your suspended card right away. So there you go, that's how you steal a city, Mapuche style. And notice that you can target any player, could be you, could be an opponent. So it depends where you think you might get the better deal. Maybe you've even got something that allows you to peek at the top card of a player's library, and then you know for sure that I wanted this thing right here. So there was a whole lot of things to unravel in this Mapuche set. I really like it. I think it's one of my better ones. It really seems to fit well together, and some things they don't necessarily fit well with the rest of the cards, but they open the door to a whole bunch of different strategies. And in fact, yeah, that's the mark of a great potential commander, is that there are many ways of approaching such a deck. Maybe you do want to stick a whole bunch of theft effects in a deck like that. Maybe you want instead to focus on the suspend keyword. I know that the Doctor Who cards added a whole bunch of effects that dealt with time counters and suspend. Who else but Doctor Who to deal with time counters, of course. So maybe those are your go-to cards to build a deck like that. Also, maybe you want a whole bunch of red direct damage and creature removal effects, because don't forget, your Lautaro effect kicks in when a creature an opponent controls dies. So maybe you want to make sure that your opponent's creatures do die quite often. And finally, would you want to rely very heavily on the Walmapu land of the Mapuche? Would you want to fill your deck with advisors or legendary creatures in order to truly maximize that awesome and very versatile land? That's another thought. And since you do get some +1/+1 counters through that land, maybe you want to focus on +1/+1 counters. There are so many ways to approach a deck like that. Even the Malin Raider, if you can somehow get it every game reliably and make copies of it, then you could really hose down your opponent, just tap their land, stun their land, steal their mana. That could be very nasty. So let me know what you think of the Mapuche. How would you build Lautaro? Any of the ways I mentioned make sense, or is there something else I haven't thought of? And don't forget to like, kneel, and subscribe. Loki the Gamer says thank you.